As we look back into the scripture this evening, Exodus chapter 17 is where I want to draw your attention. Exodus chapter 17, and we're going to read the last part of that chapter. Actually, we won't even get the whole way through to the end of the chapter, but I want to focus on a pretty familiar story, probably to many of you, but the story of Moses up in the mountain as Joshua was fighting in the valley there, fighting the battle against the Amalekites. Exodus chapter 17, verse number 8. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, Choose us out men, and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said to him, and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Just stop there with verse 13. But I want to talk to you tonight. We'll touch on different characters here in that little story, but especially dealing with the support teams that are necessary. Support teams. Just this past week, I had some interaction with someone in ministry who shared that it had been a fairly tough week. Been some unexpected, I think maybe some unexpected disappointments or hurts, things that come at him from different directions, and again, maybe unexpectedly in some aspects. And we had a little bit of interaction there, maybe trying to encourage one another or whatever, but really it might surprise us sometimes at how many people feel the struggle in the battle, feel like, I don't know how I can keep going. And maybe sometimes just even to recognize how tough life can be for those, maybe those in ministry, but also even others around us. And it's easy maybe for us to again, point, especially in a case like this, point at the ministry, point at somebody in leadership. But really, I believe it can apply to our neighbors, maybe our even extended family, different ones that are around us. And I want to urge us tonight to be that Aaron or Hur, to be able to help sustain those who are weary in responsibilities. Let's just kind of quickly review the details of this story and kind of touch on a few little details. A little bit that I've read about it. It sounds like it was about 2 months after the children of Israel had come out of Egypt. We remember how God had led them in an unpredictable, maybe I shouldn't say it that way, but an unexpected journey at least. They thought, we could just go right up through the main thoroughfare here and we'll be able to get right to our land of promise right away. But God had led them in a sort of a little detour, and even through the Red Sea. All of that even was probably unexpected for most of the children of Israel. But God was trying, apparently, from what we can understand, it seemed as though God was trying to keep them away from the various wicked nations, the ones who would war against them. And I believe God even did kind of indicate, at least to Moses, that was why he was leading them the way he was. We don't want to get the people discouraged right away. And so here at this point, they've made their way down through. God has delivered them through the Red Sea. And about 2 months into their journey, now Amalek comes up. For what I can understand, sounds like they sort of were, maybe a little bit like the wolves. They'd prey on the ones in the rear, the ones who maybe were a little weaker, the animals even that were lagging behind. And so they are probably, again, just sort of what I can gather, sounds like maybe they were one of the most prominent, maybe the largest, maybe even the most warlike, I'm not sure about that, but of the nations that were there in that Sinai Peninsula. And maybe they were fearing for even their what would you call that, the pasture land or whatever, where flocks could eat the good of the land, and here comes this whole huge body of Israelites, and they are millions, probably, who knows for sure, but maybe roughly 2 million people, and they're going to just take all our pasture land. And maybe that was part of the problem as well. I don't know all the reasons, but now God's people have a fight on their hands as Amalek has come to fight. Now, obviously, we recognize too, Moses' rod. We'll just touch on that for a moment. God had given Moses the miracles through his rod. Remember, even there in the wilderness, he had thrown down the rod, it turned into a snake. Of course, then he picked it back up. It was a rod again. But and then as he goes back to Pharaoh, the rod was a key instrument of God's favor and God's miracles in his hand. And so now he says, I'm going to take the rod. I'm going to go up on this hillside. I'm going to watch the battle. Probably Moses is getting up in years. Obviously, we recognize that he was somewhat up in years, at least, what we would call up in years, 80-some. And so Moses is up on the mountain. He's not down there fighting the battle personally, but he's up there on the, I don't know if we say mountain, but hill at least. And he's having the rod there with him. And Aaron and Hur go with him. And I don't know. I'm not sure all that was involved. Very possibly Moses assured Joshua, I'm going to have the rod. I know God's going to do something for you. You take courage. You do the work that needs to be done. I don't know all those details, but whether God had assured Moses that was going to be the instrument of victory again or just what. But Moses was up there watching the battle, has the rod. He apparently has raised it up. Remember how he had raised it up over the Red Sea and God did the miracle. He has the rod raised apparently, and Joshua's winning the battle. But then his arm gets tired. Some of you that maybe have tried some of that, you even just hold your hand out with some small weight on it for just a little bit. It doesn't take very long, and I'm worn out. We just can't hold it out like that very long. And Moses couldn't hold the rod forever, and so he had to lower it. And it soon became clear that if he didn't have the rod raised up in victory, then Joshua was suffering retreat at least, and in danger of defeat. And that's when Aaron and Hur came alongside and helped in making sure the battle was won. So, who is the Moses around us? Or maybe not just who is the Moses, but are we willing to be the Aaron and the Hur? Are we finding ways to offer support even in the battles today? Let me we'll just touch on the several different people that are involved here. First of all, of course, we can recognize that Joshua is there in the battle. He's fighting. He's chosen out these men. He's a young general. Remember, he hasn't even gone off to be the spy yet. And, we say relatively young at least. I don't know, maybe roughly in the 40-ish range. I'm not sure exactly how old. Might have not been anywhere near that old. Caleb apparently indicated he was somewhere around 40, and maybe Joshua was somewhere close to that age. So apparently, relatively young. The army had never, to our knowledge at least, had never been in battle before. That's a pretty tough task. We think even of the early days of our country and how much it took to get the soldiers into fighting form, even at the Revolutionary War or our War for Independence. And Baron von Steuben is kind of credited with kind of getting our soldiers into line. I don't know what Joshua was even able to do. Maybe they had been training before this time, but now Joshua is suddenly confronted with a battle. And he's down there in the valley, and he's having to try to lead. This is a new venture for him, very likely. It was a fierce test. Obviously, as we discover later on, Joshua was a worthy general, not just in the matter of fighting, but just even keeping his confidence in God, even in his spy work and all those things. He was worthy. And he was the servant of Moses, and God raised him up to be the future leader. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thought, maybe. At least it was to me. I don't know whether Joshua was able to look up every once in a while, look up on the hillside, see Moses is still there. His rod's still raised. I could go forward. Let's take courage, men. I don't know. I don't know if he could see that or not. But he was able to know Moses is up there pulling on God for me. And we might even think of that as we look at Moses for just a moment here. Maybe as that man who was sort of partway between the fighting men and God. Kind of that intermediary. We might call him the intercessor today or this evening, and even kind of focus on that part of it just a little bit and recognize that intercession is part of the battle also. Obviously, Joshua represents the soldiering on and fighting the battle. And so, yes, soldiering is a part, but intercession is also part of the battle. Again, obviously, we know about Moses and his rod. We recognize that he was able to do mighty things, and God was dear to him and near to him. And we understand he was older at this point, maybe not in the position to do the battle in the valley like Joshua was able to do. But that didn't mean that he didn't have a duty. That didn't mean he could just sit back and watch. It didn't mean that he could just find fault with Joshua's technique. It didn't mean that he could try to hinder the work in any way. Obviously, Moses wouldn't have been wanting to do that, but we recognize that. Sometimes we might think that that's sort of the role of the older ones, is to look down on our young people. But that wasn't Moses' task. In a manner of speaking, his job was between God and man as intercessor, as the one to pull on heaven, say, Lord, please touch my people down there. Touch your people, really, is what it came down to. Touch your people in this battle. We didn't ask for this fight. They're seeking out battle against us. Touch my young fella down there. Touch Joshua. In a measure, maybe we could even say that he had his eyes on the fight, but his heart up in the clouds, so to speak. His heart there reaching out to God. Lord, touch your people. I don't know if he was audibly talking with God or not. Obviously, it was a little different day, and people talk with God. Obviously, we think of Enoch or Abraham or different ones, and so maybe he was doing that. Even later on, Moses talked there to God in the mountain. But I don't know whether he was audibly talking to God right there or not, but he was holding up the standard, you might say, the standard flag, the fighting colors, or whatever the terminology that we use sometimes in war and all those things. But he had taken his place of intercession for the men in the trenches. Maybe not fighting hand-to-hand combat, but he was fighting in his soul and holding up that standard for his people. Intercession is also part of the battle. But what I really want us to get this evening here in this passage is the support that is also part of the battle. Support is also part of the battle. And these two men that we know about Aaron, but we don't talk about her a whole lot. But they're the ones that I'd like to kind of focus just a little bit more on this evening. And one, of course, being Moses' brother. He became the high priest and was key in future developments there with the people of Israel. But not just Aaron, there was this other man by the name of Hur. Don't know all about him. There are some thoughts from some of the ancient writers have indicated through rabbis or whoever that maybe this was actually Moses' brother-in-law. That would be Miriam's husband, or possibly even her son. There's a little question as to just who among them. I don't know that we really know for sure. We do know that he was the father or grandfather, I guess maybe grandfather of the man who was so skilled in working with gold and stuff that he was able to build the various items for the tabernacle. Bezaleel was his name. And her apparently is, I think, maybe a grandfather of him. So we know just a little bit about him, but not a whole lot. But these two men go up there. Again, maybe it's all family. Maybe it's Moses and his brother and their brother-in-law. I don't know for sure. But the real point of the issue here, or the story about them, is not necessarily their identity, but their involvement in this situation, in this battle. The involvement that they had. Again, perhaps even their age also kept them from being with Joshua in the heat of the battle. Of course, Aaron was about 3 years older, I believe, than Moses. And Miriam was also older than Moses. And so a brother-in-law very possibly was also up there in years. And so very possibly that's what was going on. And so these are sort of the aged men. They're up there. They're pulling for Joshua down there in the battle. Again, I don't know just how the connection was made concerning the lowering of the rod. You know, you think, well, they're up there on the hill, and I don't know how much they could see. I don't know if it was very obvious to them when Joshua and his men started to retreat or just what. I'm not sure all those details. But these men recognized that Moses needed support. It was vital for him to keep his rod raised. That was pretty obvious. They must have been able to tell. And whenever his arm got heavy and he just, I gotta take a little bit of a break. Pretty soon they see our men are retreating. They're not winning the battle. And so it was vital for him to keep the rod raised. Again, I mentioned it to you earlier, but almost as a battle standard, that battle flag. These are our colors. And obviously his own physical weariness and frailty was bringing weakness to the cause. And so these men that are up there with him, they're seeing our men grow weak when our leader grows weak. And we need to support him. We need to somehow help. I don't know just who came up with the idea, but they got this big rock, got it over there. All right, Moses, you sit down right here and we'll stand beside you. We're going to hold your arms up. We'll make sure that this happens. And as Aaron and Hur saw the need, they took responsibility to step in, to support Moses. Not just for a moment either. That's important to notice here as well. This was for the long haul. These men, we may not give them as much credit even as they deserve. At least if I understand right, it seems as though Moses is seated and they're standing. And if you'll notice, in verse 12, the very end here, his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. That's for the long haul. That's all day. I'm not really interested. Even by the end of a Sunday, I'm kind of ready just to sit down. Sometimes, I do there in the back as we greet one another. I just got to take a little bit of a break. I've been on my feet so long, and we recognize that sometimes is very difficult. But these men saw the need and they stood in the battle. It took all day. And this is really the kind of the heart of the matter for us in practical ways. Every one of us faces battles. Every one of us goes through some tough times, and it might be easy to apply it to ministry, and I think that's important, and I certainly need it. We also need to recognize that our duty as Christians is to support the weak, to support those who are struggling, those who are in the battle, those who are weary of all stripes, whoever they may be. They're the ones we are supposed to support and help. Really, I don't want to be too hard on us maybe, but I do want us to recognize if we could see the whole battle, if we could see all that's happened, if we could see those who have given up in discouragement, if we could see those who have turned and gone another way because somebody wasn't there to help them, we might be depressed at what we could have done and how we failed and how we allowed this to happen. Oh, we wouldn't want to think that's the case, but maybe that really is the problem. Maybe we haven't stepped up. Maybe we haven't supported those who were discouraged to step in and come alongside and support them and encourage them. But how can we do this? How can we be an Aaron and a Hur? How can we be someone who will stand beside and encourage? We don't always notice the discouragement, so how can we? Well, let me just give you 4 little things that I see in our story here this evening, and maybe would be a help to us in some ways. I think you'll be able to see where I'm coming from here, just from the story. But first of all, we need to be aware of the battle. We need to be aware of the battle. Obviously, in the story here, we can recognize the 3 men are up there on the hill. They're watching what's going on. They're in tune with what's happening. But really, even in our own situation, we need to recognize what is going on and how much the devil is seeking to destroy every single one of us. From the youngest to the oldest, from the newest Christian to the most experienced saint, the devil is in attack mode. And we need to be aware of the battle. We need to recognize what really is going on. We need to recognize how the devil is seeking to destroy. And sometimes we may think we know the battle. But if we're not in tune with what is really happening, if we're not aware of what the devil is trying to do, then we could actually be some of his instrument in bringing that about. We need to be aware of the battle, recognize what's happening, recognize where there's some retreat, recognize where there's some struggles, recognize how we can help to support them. Be aware of the battle. Another aspect that we need to recognize here too is that we need to be involved in people's lives. For one, I guess if we think about the story here, for one thing, the issue is Moses was not up there alone. He had two companions that went with him. I don't know the reasons for all that. The Bible doesn't tell us that. We don't know if they already were foreseeing the issue or if they just recognized, hey, Moses, you're going up there to support. We want to be there to help. I'm not really sure. I don't know all that was happening here, but these two men, Aaron and Hur, were up there with Moses. You know, it's pretty easy for us, if we're just sort of cloistered somewhere, to think about all these people and think about all the needs and maybe even struggle through some of those things a little bit in our own minds. But really, if we're going to be a help to people that are discouraged and struggling and facing need, we got to be involved in their lives. You got to be out there with them. Got to be spending time with them. Spend time in their homes. Recognize where they're struggling. Know what's going on. It's easy for us just to kind of put up a facade or a strong front, and we just say, oh, everything's great. I'm doing well. God's helping. But really, if we're honest, which often happens, I'll say it that way, that often happens only as we are closely involved with people. Until we spend that time with people, it may seem like all is well. But then we hear the real story. We hear about the struggle. We hear about the battle. We hear about what's going on over here. It takes involvement in people's lives. It takes being close to them. Obviously, as a pastor, that means being in people's homes. That means listening to what they have going on, listening to the struggles that they're dealing with. Other people may look on, they have no idea. But if we're close, if we're spending time with them, we may be able to recognize the fight that they're in. Be involved in people's lives. The third aspect is we need to be ready to step up. We need to be ready to step up. It's easy for us to observe from a distance, observe the struggles, observe the battle. Obviously, again, many times we get kind of ingrown, in-focused. We don't really think about other people as much as we should. But even if we do, we're seeing it from a distance. But sometimes there are messy parts to being a help, to being an encouragement, to lift up the hands that hang down, to strengthen the feeble knees, as the prophet tells us there in the Old Testament. It can be messy. And we have to be ready to step up. We have to be ready to reach out. We need to be ready to make a difference. These men, of course, Aaron and Hur, I don't know, maybe one of them was the one that had the idea. I'd like to think that probably, but I don't really know. They're recognizing what's happening. They say, hey, here, let's get this stone. We've already mentioned about that, but they're going through these things. They were ready to step up, ready to stand beside him, ready to help him. And you and I need to be ready to step up. Not just to even listen, although that's part of it. That's the involvement side. The kind of getting involved, being close to people. But we have to be ready to do what it takes to help them. Be ready to support. Be ready to disciple. Be ready to help. Be ready to encourage. Be ready to step up. But lastly, be willing to stay close long term. As I mentioned to you already, the verse tells us it was all day. Now, we don't know for sure when the battle may have taken place initially. When did it start? Was it early morning? I don't know for sure about that. But it does tell us there in verse 12, until the going down of the sun. It was a severe battle. It was a long-term process. And these men stood all day, staying close for the long term. And sometimes we like to see all the victories won right away. And even at an altar of prayer, sometimes we can have people come and in about 5 minutes, all right, now you ready to take it by faith? Wait a minute here. Sometimes it takes a while. And we need to be willing to stay by the stuff. Stay by the struggle. Stay by the struggling one, even, maybe we could say. The seeker. We need to stay by them. Maybe it's not even a seeker at the altar, but even just somebody that you're dealing with. We need to stick by them. Sometimes it's easy for us, and I believe in the New Testament there, maybe it was Jesus that kind of indicated that sometimes we can just say, oh, okay, yeah, just Lord bless you. Be warmed and fed, help, or I'm trying to help and encourage you, but then we want to just go our own way and do our own thing and enjoy our own life and just hope things get better. But really, we need to be willing to stay close long term. Stick by it. Stay by those who are discouraged, those who are needing a supporting hand. I was actually moved to tears this morning as I had one of my supporters, you might say. I had my Aaron or my her, I don't know which one he is, but I had him text me again, give encouragement. I was blessed also in the case I mentioned at the beginning of the message, when just a few words seemed to encourage that one. One reason God has been involved in our lives is so that we can be involved in others' lives. And not one of us is in heaven yet. And many times we don't know the battles that we're facing. We don't know the weariness. We don't know how much the struggle is there to just kind of let down. We need to hold each other up. Hold each other up in prayer. We sometimes sing that song, I need the prayers of those I love. And we need one another. We need to be an Aaron and a her. And sometimes we need an Aaron and a her. We need somebody to support us. And many, many times we can look on and we don't think there's really the struggle that there is. We don't see it. We don't recognize it. But God help us. Be aware of the battle. Be involved in people's lives. Be ready to step up. And be willing to stay close long term. You and I are support teams for other people. May God help us to do our duty faithfully. Amen.